All right guys, so the CRF250L Rally, this is a sweet little bike. It's been out for a couple years and Honda just made some modifications to the CRF250L to release this bike. So obviously it's got all new plastics and bodywork, and they made a few modifications to the suspension as well. So this bike is pretty sweet right off the showroom floor. It's gonna work great for anybody commuting or anybody that's just getting into the sport with adventure and dual sport riding. So MSRP on this bike is $5,900, and that's pretty inexpensive considering some of the other bikes that are available and on the market today. And so with that inexpensive price, we wanted to see if we could set this thing up and what parts and pieces that we actually had to add to this thing to make it worthy for our type of riding. The first thing that we wanted to address on this thing is performance. So yes, this bike's a 250, and yes, there's a lot to be desired in stock form, but there's a few things that you can do to make it much better over that stock setup. So starting from the ground up, we're gonna talk about tires. The stock tires on this bike are probably okay to get you from the driveway across the gravel to the road, but if you're doing any sort of dirt riding, you need a real setup. So we went to the Dunlop 606 tires. That's really our staple in all of our adventure bikes, and it's just the best tire that we found for our type of riding. Along with the tires, we did heavy duty tubes and rim locks. The next thing I want to cover is suspension on this bike, and suspension is probably the biggest downfall in my eyes of this bike. It's super soft. They just made a real basic setup for this bike, and it's not adjustable at all. So there's a few things that you can do to this thing to make it way better. First, on the forks, we actually added a Race Tech front fork spring upgrade kit, and stock, this bike has a separate function fork design. So the right side has a spring in it, the left side controls all the damping. So the Race Tech kit just adds a spring to the left fork and really stiffens the front up and makes it way better for off-road riding. Next, let's talk about the shock. So this thing, like I said, is non-adjustable, and it really is just overly soft, especially when you put any luggage on it. So to get around that, the only real way that we found is to just replace the shock. And there's a few different options on the market right now. The hard thing with that is, since this bike is so inexpensive stock, it's hard to really justify adding close to $1,000 rear shock to this thing, but it is a must-have if you're gonna do any type of serious off-road riding. All right, so the next thing that I wanna cover with this bike is the weight of this thing. And it's no secret that this thing's pretty heavy for being a 250. Power to weight ratio is not optimal on this thing, and there's a few things that you can do to help the little bike out. So the first thing that we added is a Tusk lithium battery, and that's a real inexpensive way to save a few pounds on a bike. On this bike, we actually saved over 4.5 pounds over the stock battery, so that's huge. And the next thing that we added to this thing is a full Fmf exhaust system. We added the power bomb header up front and an Fmf Q4 silencer in the back, and combined, that thing saves over 7.5 pounds over the stock system. Now, adding the Fmf system to the bike definitely makes it louder. It's deeper and more throaty, and yes, it does sound good, but if you're wanting to keep your rally as quiet as possible, a full exhaust system may not be the best upgrade for you. Next thing we're going to talk about for this bike is comfort. So starting with the saddle, the stock seat on this thing, it did the job, but it wasn't really comfortable for those longer rides. So we went to Seat Concepts. Seat Concepts is one of the best in the biz, and they've really got their seats figured out. They're nice and narrow and retain that stock narrowness up front, so you can get your legs out where you need to, or when you're standing up, but it gets wider as you come back to the rear of the seat. So when you're cranking out those highway miles, you can scoot back a little bit and have that added comfort. Next thing I'm going to talk about is the foot pegs on this bike. And I've got a stock one right here. The stock pegs on this bike are not too bad. They got me by a few rides, but I wanted to see what other options were out on the market. So we went to IMS. They've got a bunch of different foot peg options for this bike, but in true rally fashion, we went with the Rally foot peg. And all kidding aside, these pegs are sweet. They're wider, they're longer, and they just add way more comfort over the small stock foot pegs. Moving up the rider triangle, I need to talk about handlebars. So stock bars on this thing are steel. They're gonna bend pretty easy if you go down. So we went to an oversized bar, 1 1/8. With that, we had to do a Tusk big bar adapter. And with the handlebars, we got a new set of grips on there. And underneath those, we went with a Tusk grip heater kit. Just keeps your mitts nice and toasty on those colder rides. The next thing I want to talk about on this bike is electrical. So starting up front, we added the Baja Design Squadron Pro LED light. The stock headlight on this bike, it looks cool and it works pretty good, but adding this Baja Designs light, it really illuminates the night, and it's so bright in fact that it'll even brighten your day. Moving to the back of the machine, you can see I've got the stock taillight assembly here. These things are really big and clunky, so to clean up the back end of this machine, I went with the DRC LED tail light and the Tusk mini stock turn signals. It cleans up the back end and gets rid of all this extra unnecessary weight. Last thing that I'm going to cover in electrical is the 12-volt power socket. This thing's a must-have because you need to be able to charge your accessories when you're out on your rides. The next thing I'm going to talk about on this bike is luggage. So if you plan on taking this bike on any serious adventure rides, you're going to need a real luggage system. So you can see that on this bike we've got the Tusk pannier rack and top rack kit, and these install easily, and these are an awesome kit. They're super versatile. For these pannier racks, you actually have the option to mount either hard boxes or soft bags, whichever work best for your type of riding. So now let's quickly run through the gear that I've got on this thing. You can see all these pieces are from Wolfman, and we've been using these things for years. We've got thousands of miles, multiple rides on these things, and they're still working great for us. So up front, I've got the Blackhawk tank bag, and it's got plenty of space for everything that I need to carry and have quick access to. Moving to the back, I'm running the Expedition dry duffel bag, and this holds all the camping gear. And then for my saddlebags, I've got the Rocky Mountain saddlebags. Now, something nice I want to mention with these is we're actually running our new Tusk soft luggage mounts. And the huge benefit of these things is it makes it super easy to take your bags on and off the bike. You can carry them to your campsite, to your hotel room, whatever you need. The last thing I need to talk about in luggage is the Rotopacks I've got mounted under here. So the stock tank on the Rally is 2.7 gallons. It's not bad for a stock tank on a little bike, but I'm only averaging about 130 miles per tank, and that's just not going to cut it for the longer segments on our adventure rides. So to get around that, I've got the 1 gallon Rotopacks mounted back here. You can see it bolts right to the top rack on this bike, and I can fit my duffel bag on top of that, and it fits pretty securely. So that setup gets us the extra range that we need on our longer adventure rides. So the last few products that I want to talk about on this bike are just things that we added to the bike to finish it off and make it work for our type of riding. So up front, you can see we've got handguards. They're the Tusk D-Flex Pro handguards. These things have already seen a lot of carnage. They're there whenever we need them, if and when we lay it over, I guess. Next, you can see I added the double take adventure mirrors, and these things are awesome. They're a huge upgrade over the stock mirrors. They use ram mounts to attach to the handlebars, and those things help to isolate the vibration so you can actually see what's behind you. The other nice thing about them is when you get off-road in those tighter and more technical trails, you can quickly fold them out of the way when you need to. The last couple of products that I added is a Tusk shift lever, and like I said before, I really like the bodywork and lines of this bike. So to complement that, we had a Tag Graphics go through, build a custom kit for this bike, and we really love the way that it turned out. And that does it for our CRF250L Rally bike build. Now, with the parts and accessories that we've got on this thing, it makes it awesome for our adventure rides. We're really loving this bike, and we look forward to all the other rides that we're gonna go on. If you guys have any questions or comments, leave them below and we'll be sure and get back to you. If you wanna see more bike builds like this one, subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in the loop. Thanks for watching.